Well, hello, that's me again. Today is January 28th, 2025. And I want to start with something which you probably already heard from me before. And you can read those basically testimony to that from one of the greatest liberal thinkers of the Western world, Isaiah Berlin. And in his wonderful piece on Russian thinkers, not piece, it's actually essentially a collection of their essays. And he describes there when in early 1930s, Bertrand Russell, speaking to Lady Ottoline Morel, make a note, so to speak, or actually emphasize the fact that, as he stated, if Russia is populated by such characters as described in Dostoevsky's novels, then it's probably Bolshevism is the only government Russians need, because, essentially developing what he was implied by him, it actually fits their national character. It was as arrogant, typical British arrogance and ignorant statement by Bertrand Russell as you would expect pretty much from anybody from Great Britain, even then or today, especially today, for people who, as I'm on record for many years now, there are no real Russian, specialists, real Russian experts, and basically everything the combined West knows about modern Russia and its Soviet period is primarily the fairy tales, if you wish, or basically mythology which was created with the great input from, for example, white immigration. Many people do not know this, but huge portions of white immigration supported Hitler. They wanted those, Bolsheviks gone, so, obviously there is always this Jewish element that all those monarchists especially saying that, Jews, turned Russia into this, gulag. Well, as late Colonel Lang, on his famous website at that time, SST, wrote, he was at that time in early 60s at the essentially intelligence school in Garmisch, Germany. And all Russian programs there were run by former white people, white immigration, including the white officer, Tsarist officer. And he was stunned when he was studying Russian history by one of the Russian white officers who hated not just Bolsheviks, which you probably would understand, he hated Russians, being Russian himself. And of course, what many people do not understand, that those people, they had all reasons, first, to lie about how they really managed to basically drain the country to flush the country down the drain, because they needed explanation. It could have been anything, Judeo-Masonic conspiracy, or some kind of whatever you have, aliens, so that's what they were selling this primarily. And then, of course, when you look attentively at the extremely low, generally very low historiography level of the Western, on the Western part, and especially about the Soviet history, so there's no surprise. And so I want to start, I deliberately brought it to our attention here, because we're going to be talking today about what many people asked me, why don't you talk about it, with more focus on it. So let's start with this. We have this situation. As you can see yourself, and it's yesterday, affront to history, as Nadezhda Romanenko writes, which is the nation that liberated Auschwitz is being excluded from memory. It is, absolutely. Eventually, as I specifically stated in the previous times, it will be Mr. Trump hugging the American flag on the chancellery in Berlin in 1945. And many people in Europe already think that actually Auschwitz and all those death camps in Poland, and there was a reason why they were in Poland. The Polish people didn't like their Jewish part. And so Russia exclusion from the commemoration marking the 80th anniversary of Auschwitz liberation is not just a diplomatic snub. It is an insult to history and to the memory of millions who suffered and died during World War II. Nothing new here. If you look attentively, as I already stated, on the historiography and how it is written in the West, from United States to Great Britain, where you have falsifiers and losers like Sir Anthony Beaver, who basically, you know, it's not even historiography. The guy, as he stated himself, he felt much more comfortable in actually German and Wehrmacht archives than he felt in the city of Podolsk, you know, with the Red Army archives. But, you know, yeah, obviously, because once those archives have been opened, everything which was invented and basically mythologized about Red Army and the Soviet Union went out of the window. But they couldn't allow this. So, on January 27th, 1945, the Soviet Red Army liberated Auschwitz, revealing to the world the unimaginable horrors of Holocaust. If you read attentively, for example, the book, biography by Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, by his grandson, David Eisenhower. It's a famous book, I showed it many times. You will recognize that there was a really interesting passage in this wonderful volume that actually in 1942, United States was already thinking that Soviet Union somehow will do the, you know, separate deal with Hitler, and hence came this unconditional surrender thing from FDR. But reality was that none other than actually imperial intelligence, you know, British stated that the number of, you know, bloodshed between Russians and Germans, they still didn't believe them what Russians were telling about what Germans were committing, because of course they're Western people, you know, how could Germans commit such things? You know, these are, you know, those subhuman Slavs and peasants which are supposed to be, you know, this crude barbaric horde, you know, but they still stated already that any kind of the settlement between Hitler and Stalin was impossible. In this, they were correct. But I want to demonstrate to you, apart from the fact that obviously Vladimir Putin celebrated, not only him, the whole, you know, Russia marks this somber but happy in the same time occasion of the 81st anniversary of lifting the siege of Leningrad, which lost in about 900 days. The number of losses there is just catastrophic. Hitler wanted this city erased, and he wanted all those people die from hunger. That's what blockade was all about, the siege. But it doesn't mean that everything is, you know, constantly being mythologized to the point of that it becomes ridiculous. No, there are still some people, and I want to talk about those people today, who, like Sarah Payne, who is professor of the history and strategy. Okay, look at her CV here, and she teaches in the U.S. Naval War College. And as you can see yourself, she graduated magna cum laude in Latin American Studies at Harvard College. She spent 10 years acquiring her PhD in Russian and Chinese history. That actually, you have to immediately understand that you couldn't get the real Russian history in the United States since practically 1940s. But then included 5 years of research and language study in China, Taiwan, Russia, Japan, and Australia. But she is a very eloquent woman, obviously very intelligent, and she obviously provided some really astonishing things about, you can go to my blog and see for yourself what she was talking about there, for example, D-Day, and she described it as the absolutely secondary, you know, side show to what was happening on the main theater and why Russians have the full claim on the victory in the World War II. But remarkably, this woman who, well, she definitely knows her subject as far as the humanities educated linguist and so-called historian can know it, because you cannot know the military history, and she teaches strategy. I don't know how you can teach strategy not having the full-blown military cadre education, but well, nonetheless, she is very eloquent, and definitely her statements about what I just stated about World War II, I can only applaud to her. Yet, even a few days ago, when she was talking about this whole thing about how Soviet Union and China and war for India, I deliberately singled out this segment, which actually is marked as cruelty in Russian history. And so she, being a historian, and as she said, well, she works for the US government. She says, I've just recently read Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I should have read it years ago when it came out. And she talks about all those, repeating all those mythology, I mean, complete falsified facts, if you wish, about, barrier troops, about those cruelty of Russians, and which brings us back to Bertrand Russell and Lady Ottoline Morale. And for historian of her statue, and of course the historian who teaches the US naval elite, because you need to be somebody to get into the US Naval War College. And then suddenly you have to ask yourself a question: does she know that whatever Solzhenitsyn wrote about war, and it was fiction, most of it, 95%? Apart from the fact that it was stolen from other people who didn't use any sources. Some of them were just simply confabulated. So if she thinks that Gulag Archipelago is the documentary or historical work, I have news for her. It is the work of fiction. But this is what narrative in the United States is. And if people even of this stature and of this intelligence fall for this garbage and still believe that, Russians have been, just lined up and executed by barrier troops, not even understanding what it was, what they were doing, and what can I say? There is no surprise then that the program is on a full roll, so to speak. Yes, eventually Russians, Red Army, everything, they will be erased from European history, and nobody will care who defeated Nazi Germany. In the end, it will be Washington and London, of course. Without Great Britain, what could have possibly be done there, And then, okay, not to diminish the heroism of British people, in terms of their, standing up to Hitler in the very dire situation in 1940, that, well, it was known that England essentially exhaled in, in relief when Hitler assaulted and, started attacking Soviet Union in the June 22, 1941. It was clear that the danger essentially evaporated. That those, bombing raids, they were there all along. And so you look at this and you say to yourself, we have the people who are being prepared by these same people who believe all those things. This is not to say that Russians don't have traitors, that Russians didn't have cruel, treatment of own people. Yeah, but if you go back, let's say 30 years, forgive me, I could be wrong. It could be not 30, it could be 29 years. But after this, after Russia in 1990s opened their archives, including those Gulag archives, there was actually the working group, I believe it was the combination of the Stanford University and some other people in history departments. They went to Moscow. They went to Russia and got access to most of the archives of the KGB and Gulag's system, and which was NKVD at that time. And they did the press conference. For those people who want to really confirm it, I'm pretty sure if you go through the C-SPAN, I know it's a very tall order, and I'm not even sure that they still have it, for example, on the internet directly. But you will be surprised when they came back, including doing all those, copies of those documents and, piles and piles of documents on the microfilm and all that. And they came and giving the press conference on C-SPAN, they were saying that, no, we were stunned. Yeah, obviously there was Gulag. There was, of course, the repressions. But there was nowhere near what had been told. And what had been told by Solzhenitsyn, for example, and his friend, well, Mr. Kurganov, Professor Kurganov, who is a Nazi cooperator, so to speak, and one of the chief editors of one of the Nazi newspaper on the occupied territories, that's who, these are the people who teach Americans, and they continue to teach them about all what is happening outside. That is why United States, doesn't understand Russia. It cannot fight it. If it will fight it, they still believe in this BS. But and of course, we have the issues of the downright mental low IQ people such as Michael McFaul, people who have such a low qualifications that you have to basically ask yourself a question: how the hell they even ended up even in their soft degrees, which are history, and even language, So and apart from, of course, Chinese language and Japanese or whatever Asian language. Those are hard, I know. So, and you look at this and you say, you have to ask yourself a question: this continues. Does it continue? Yes, it does. And it becomes especially very important to understand what is happening, that, well, how to put it politely, they still think about those illusions, about about Russia, about those complete, false narrative about practically everything what is happening in Russia. And I, as already stated, I can give you now the numbers, because you know what, no matter how we look at those numbers, my essentially statement rings true throughout the last two decades at least. Westerners, not Western elites, we know who they are. We know that there are very few normal, moral people among them. Most of them are academic and political frauds. Most of them are also cowards and sociopaths. But the problem with all that, the reason why this continues to, and they continue to basically believe in any kind of garbage, which is thrown, like millions of Russian soldiers, Red Army soldiers executed, or, 2.5 million, why not 10 million German women raped, things of this nature. Let me explain. It was always there. Europeans always hated Russia and the Russians. And what is happening right now, Russians finally formalized it. But the question is not just because of the start of the special military operation. No, it has nothing to do with it. It's not a bug. It's a feature. It is inherent in the European psyche, European history. And here we are. Let's take a look at Pew Research. And even those people who will say to me that, oh, it's still Pew Research, we might, give and take something on numbers. Sure, absolutely. And they say, oh, it could have been, influenced by special military operation. Let me remind you that before special military operation, majority of Europeans didn't view Russians as the European people. Russians for Europeans are aliens. They are different civilization, they are different culture, and for very many of them, they are subhumans. So if we go to 2023, for example, here it is. I singled out this Pew Research. You can go on their website and easily find the attitudes of the Europeans towards Russia and Russians. As you can see yourself, in 2023, it was largely negative. Okay, we can certainly give some, so to speak, allowance for the incessant brainwashing propaganda. But if you look attentively at Poland or Sweden or Spain, they always hated Russian gods. They just cannot stand them. And even so-called rich people, well, obviously do not understand why it is the case. But yeah, even allegedly Orthodox, core religious, people, and allegedly culturally more or less closer, Greece. Look at this. Overwhelming majority of Greeks do not like Russia and hate it, essentially. The only people who really care about Russians in a positive way are Indians, as you can say yourself, and even Indonesia. So, but this was 2023. So let's go to the 2024. This is attitude towards Russia and Russians. Look at this. We still get those overwhelming numbers. For example, Polish, not all, but majority of Poles, they cannot stand freaking Russians, And as a result, we have the situation with the invitation to the Auschwitz. Okay, Russians say, you know what, I'm remaining on record, I insist that Russia has to repatriate all monuments and all graves of Russian Red Army soldiers back to Russia and close any kind of the real relations with Europeans, because they are not worth it. Look at this. you, the fact that you have good people there are some good people, as I already stated, here and there. But look at this. There is Poland hates, or Sweden, yeah, they are fanatical Russophobes. And some people who live in Sweden, Russian people, they say that essentially the slurs and they just hate Russian gods. Same goes for Netherlands, UK, Spain, yeah, what Russians ever did to Spain. And even Germany, yeah, they learned nothing. Yeah, about 15% who are somewhat very favorable. These are primarily from the East Germany, former GDR. And as you can see yourself, even Greece, increased it, so to speak, not, a negative view of Russia. So yeah, you just can go on and on and on with this, and you will see yourself. Even Brazil, which is the member of BRICS, look at this. 19% of the Brazilian population only views Russians and Russia positively. The rest of it, overwhelming majority, which is essentially, 65%, is, yeah, just they don't like Russians. So there you go. And the question is not only, which is, of course, part of the contributing factor in the fact that, yeah, as Bertrand Russell stated that, yeah, if there are those only, people described types in like in Dostoevsky novels. The problem, of course, Dostoevsky was a fictional writer, and yeah, for example, he admitted even many times the superiority of Tolstoy, but who reads Tolstoy? And who reads the other very remote relative Tolstoy, the Alexei Tolstoy, in Combined West? Nobody, very few maybe. They do not understand what they're looking at. And as the result, when you look at those attitudes, they form a very fertile soil to which you can essentially feed any kind of garbage. And especially then when you begin to look attentively at people such as large parts of the Jewish population or Russian Jewish population in the United States, who are there to settle accounts. They are not there to study. You can take those hysterical, deranged people like Masha Gessen or Julia Ioffe or this Max Booth, who calls himself military historian. He's a moron, an ignorant creep. So, but yeah, they are there not to study anything about Russia or enlighten people. They are there to prevent any kind of the normal working relations between Combined West and Russia. And what is most important, even in accordance to the same Pew Research, now majority of Russians do not want. Actually, the last number, I believe it was 69%, who are radically were identifying themselves as non-European. The rest were like, some of them were kind of somewhat European, but overwhelming majority of Russians do not view themselves as European anymore, and they do not want to have anything to do with current, present Europe, and it's not gonna get any better, not anytime soon, probably forever now, because 300 plus years Russian, so to speak, turn towards Europe is over. And when you begin to look attentively at what is happening, and some people begin to kind of get, the ideas, not that, again, as I already stated, there Western media and Western think tanks, which are advocacy tanks, they tend to suck in all kinds of the fringe elements who sell them, like Dugin, who, I mean, if not for the death of his daughter, he would never be known even to Mr. Putin, but who has been actually thrown out of the Academy of General Staff, where he taught this so-called geopolitics, the guy who barely graduated from the Agricultural Institute. And so, but yeah, they tend to get those people and they tell them stories about Russia. This is not to say, as I already stated, that Russia is perfect. Far from it. There are many problems with Russia, and there are many problems with Russian national character. I know. I'm one myself. But the problem is that essentially you cannot have rational discussion anymore with anybody from the Combined West, including the people who probably understand, like Mrs. Payne, that yeah, we actually, United States, got on this horse too late, and by the time the Wehrmacht was defeated, essentially that was the United States time to really capitalize on what was the largest war in history. which of course was won by Russians, and which, as Mr. Rokossovsky and Zhukov told to themselves, that we liberated them from fascism and they will never forgive us for that. This is exactly what is happening. Another matter that nowadays the tables have turned, and the United States is actively exploiting Europe. It will get even worse than that for Europeans. And this is the other thing. For the majority of Russians, it's okay, hell with them, so who cares? And that has to be understood. And Pew Research polling numbers reflect perfectly why West and East, they will never come, Rudyard Kipling, they will never come together. But Russia is civilization on its own. It has a lot of, in fact, very many best features of the West, which is now dead, essentially. What we have now is the Western civilization in its decomposition, state, if you wish. And before I go, so after we discussed it a little bit, to demonstrate to you what kind of morons you are dealing with, here it is. For example, these are the cretins from European Union, and they suspected the use of Xbox and PlayStation consoles by Russia for military purposes. So they said that we, impose sanctions on that, The problem of it, of course, that Europe cannot impose sanctions on that, not to speak about the fact that Russians don't use those consoles, is that Europe doesn't produce them. So how can they, sanction them? It's just the mystery, but this is who they are. And, some people in the West begin to get, this thing right. Like in 2017, Russia is under no illusion Trump will rebuild ties. Russians know that nobody will rebuild the ties. Russians know that Trump will continue, to be, as he completely, was stomping his chest in 2017, as he stated, most was anti-Russian president in history. So, and the fact that they stopped some kind of their aid or what have you, it's primarily money for, the apparatus. Military aid continues to pour in for now, at least. They said that the flow, so to speak, including, judging by the flight radar and the planes, arriving from the United States to Rzeszów, where they usually transport military aid, is not as large as it used to be. Some people say it stopped completely. Doesn't matter. It is not because of the good heart, of Trump or his new administration. It is merely because, as even some people in the United States begin to admit, look at this. It's, Russia is winning by 3 touchdowns. U.S. Senator says yesterday. It may have little incentive to negotiate with Western nations on ending the Ukraine conflict, given that Moscow is winning due to major blunders by Kiev and NATO, according to Republican U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville. Well, actually, the whole thing is blunders by NATO, and we already learned those very unpleasant facts about the Pentagon and about U.S. Army and about, let alone those chihuahuas in Europe. They simply do not understand what war is. They never did. And they decided to go in without having no clue about who and how they were dealing with what kind of power. And so he absolutely stated, why would he want to negotiate with anybody? Exactly. If you look attentively at the situation with the losses, the slaughter continues. That's yesterday. We say that it's over the 1,043,000 killed, and things just don't go that well for the West. And if that hasn't been enough, obviously there's a lot of talk about the Greenland and all that. Here it is. As you can see yourself, this is the Arkhangelsk, brand new Russian Yasin-class submarine leaving the Severodvinsk, and as United States Naval Institute says, and by the way, make a mistake, that's another thing, which is like, why would they do this? This is a respectable publication. And they talked about Russia Commission's 5th Yasin nuclear attack sub, which was commissioned to the Navy and left actually the Severodvinsk plant 2 days ago. Now it's back into its naval base. And in terms of strike weapons, they talk about it. The 13,800-ton Yasin M can field the 1,000-mile range 3M54 caliber NK land attack cruise missile. Here's the mistake. 3M54 caliber NK is not land attack cruise missile. It is the anti-shipping missile, and NK stands for надводный корабль, which is the surface ship. So they were probably thinking about 3M14 caliber, but its caliber is not 1,000 mile range. It's more like 2,000 mile range, and the newest ones are 4,500 kilometers, which is what, around, well, 2,800 miles. So, but yeah, it also can launch the P-800 Onyx anti-ship missiles and 3M22 Zircon hypersonic anti-ship cruise missiles. And they say that the Russian Navy submarines equipped with calibers have been high on the list of US and allies undersea threats for several years. Attack boats armed with long-range missiles can hold 75% of European capitals at risk from the North Sea. Yeah, I mean, they can shoot it without leaving base, and actually with the calibers, they can reach more than just the Europe. So, and Russia is planning to expand its fleet of Yasin M-class to 12 vessels, correct. So, and they are being manufactured or built with incredible speed. And when you take a look at this, yeah, you have those, brutes, those, crude Russians, subhumans, which are, cruelty, as, Dostoevsky figures of the neurasthenics and hysterical people who are ready to commit any kind of the, cruelty, what have you, not understanding that actually the situation is actually quite opposite. And West was projecting itself all along. And the only reason they were doing this, that is why they love Solzhenitsyn. He sucks as the writer. His writing style, you are lucky if you don't know Russian and read him in English, because he was heavily edited and properly translated. While when you read his writing in Russian, my God, it's just horrible. It's unreadable, literally. But yeah, they gave him Nobel Prize for a reason, because he was from the get-go the asset to promote this idiotic idea, and he succeeded dramatically. That Mrs. Spain even thinks that she now needs to read Solzhenitsyn, who never wrote a serious historical work, including this 200 years together about the Jews in Russian Empire, which he wrote only for the reason of him being a psychotic man and very, gosh, it's very difficult to explain it. No, this is not to say that Jews didn't play the role in Russian Revolution, they certainly did. But what can I say? And this will continue, and it will get much worse. And after I listened to Tucker Carlson, who confirms that, yeah, they were trying to assassinate Putin, that tells you everything what you need to know. They're cowards. They can only kill or shoot in the back. And obviously, when we look attentively at what is happening at Special Military Operation, yeah, it's 3 touchdowns. What can I say? And this is what I wanted to tell you today. And in conclusion, as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, guys, please support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee too. And I will continue to do what I'm doing. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.